أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والضحى والليل إذا سجى ما ودعك ربك وما قلى وللآخرة خير لك من الأولى ولسوف يعطيك ربك فترضى ألم يجدك يتيما فآوى ووجدك ضالا فهدى ووجدك عائلا فأغنى فأما اليتيم فلا تقهر وأما السائل فلا تنهر وأما بنعمة ربك فحدث صدق الله العلي العظيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Brothers and sisters, respected elders, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. As always, it's a pleasure and an honor to be speaking today, and I'd like to start by thanking the hosts and the organizers of this event. May Allah bless every one of you. It's always a pleasure to be speaking to the youths. I'd like to apologize for yesterday. I'm really sorry about that. I know I got sick. I mean, it couldn't really be helped. And I'd like to thank Sayyid Hyder Hassanain, and I hope you all took advantage from him. He's really quite a knowledgeable scholar over here, and I have deep respect for him. Alhamdulillah, and I've learned a lot from him. Now, we've been discussing in this series about how to become the heroes of the future. And that's the central theme of this entire thing. Okay, so today we're going to be discussing the Holy Quran. Since it's the holy month of Ramadan, it is the month in which the Holy Quran was revealed. And we're going to be discussing about the Holy Quran in this holy month and how to really get connected to it and make the Quran a part of our lives. Now, before this discussion begins, I'd like to ask everybody, inshallah, for the purpose of this discussion, to suspend whatever thoughts you had previously when it came to the Quran. I want you to, just for the purpose of this discussion, clear your mind and forget everything you know about the Quran. Clear your mind. Pretend like you don't know anything. Pretend this is completely new. Because some of the things that I'm going to be presenting might sound a little bit bizarre, but I want you to humor them, inshallah, so that we can take, I want us to have a completely different perspective on the Holy Quran this Ramadan, inshallah. Now, this is how I'd like to present the Holy Quran. It is an instruction manual for heroes. Okay, so any heroes, any ordinary people that wish to become heroes of tomorrow, this is their instruction manual. It will help them to achieve just that. Okay, and if for a moment we humor this idea, it will make sense. A lot of questions will actually get answered. For example, why is it that in the world today, especially among the Muslims, there are so few heroes? As the saying goes, bad things happen when the good do nothing. And that makes perfect sense now, because this book is actually an instruction manual to create heroes, but this book has been abandoned by the Ummah. And that's why there are so few heroes in the world today. And that's why the world is such a miserable place today. If people had taken the Quran upon their shoulders and actually pursued the path of becoming heroes, it would be much better. And by the way, this is grounded in fact. I'm not just ranting. I'm not just saying it because I'm disgruntled or anything like that, or because other scholars say it. No, it is because the Quran itself testifies to this fact. It says, وَقَالَ الرَّسُولُ يَا رَبِّي إِنَّ قَوْمِ اتَّخِذُوا هَذَا الْقُرْآنَ مَهْجُورًا. It says, the Prophet cried out, "Oh my Lord, surely this qawm of mine, these people of mine, the Muslims, have abandoned the Quran. They have rendered it as something forsaken." So the Quran itself is testifying to this fact and this reality. So there's no wonder why there's a hadith which actually says, and it alludes to this idea. The Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that Islam came a stranger, it will leave a stranger, and it will return a stranger. When Islam came, the ignorant Arabs, they didn't understand it, right? And then when it left, again, nobody understood what Islam really is. And then when it returns, and he's alluding here to the return of Imam Mahdi, again, people will not recognize it. Why? Why won't they recognize this religion? It's because we have abandoned the Quran. And because we have abandoned it, many of the themes of Islam are just alien to us. And that's why it's difficult for us to relate with the themes of the Quran. Now, as a prelude to this discussion, I'd like you to consider this. The Quran will never give you specifics when we are considering it to be a manual for heroes. It's an instruction manual to help you become a hero, to become the best that you can be. But it's never going to give you anything specific to your time and place, although it is referring to your time. It is talking about you in this world. It's talking about your parents, your family members. It's talking about your community members. It's talking about the ummah at large. It's talking about the Christians and Jews of today. It's a very relevant book. However, the Quran will never go into specifics. It won't, for example, a prominent taghut of today, a tyrannical leader of today is Trump. I mean, I can say that. It's not exactly controversial to say that. Everybody understands that. Trump. But the Quran is never going to say, wajtanibu Trump. It's never going to use the word Trump. Instead, it's going to use examples, like the example of Fir'aun. And it wants you to identify what the criteria is. Because once you understand what the criteria is for determining who the bad guys are, who the good guys are, who are the believers, who are the non-believers, once you understand the criteria, then you will understand how it applies to your time and place. And the criteria, once that hits your mind, that is the key for you to understand what's going on, life, the universe, and everything right now in your world. And this is why, by the way, many people have this question that why is Imam Ali alayhi salam not mentioned by name in the Quran? Well, it's because the purpose of the Quran was not only for those people living in the time of Imam Ali. No, it was for Imam Ali's time and the Imams who came after him as well. We have to understand that this is a book that didn't just come for us, but it came for all the people who came after the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and it's there as a guidance, as a criterion, as a furqan for all the people, all the future generations until the Day of Judgment. And we all, whichever time we're living in, need to have this criteria. It is the key to understand. Now, we're going to have this discussion in three different spheres. There's three different spheres or three different groups. And as I mentioned these three different groups, I'd like you to ask yourself, which group do you belong to? Okay? So group number one. Group number one is a group of people that exist in the world and they say life is nothing. Life is just a game. They just think that life is just here just to, get all the gusto you can muster and just live on. You might think that this doesn't apply to you, but actually we all have a bit of this in us. Okay, that's the first group. The second group is those who recognize that no, it does have a purpose. However, it's still puzzling. Everything is confusing. Life is a riddle. Okay, so the first group believes that life is a game. The second group believes life is a riddle. And then there's the third group. And the third group are those who recognize that life is an opportunity. It's a golden, literally once in a lifetime opportunity. Okay, which of these three groups do you belong to? When we study aqa'id, we study it again in three ways: Tawheed, Nabuwah, and Qiyamah or Ma'ad, right? So Tawheed is the oneness of Allah. Nabuwah is dealing with the prophethood, and Qiyamah is dealing with the hereafter, the idea that our actions have consequences. And these three apply with these three groups. So for those who are in the first category, who think that life is a game, Tawheed comes and wakes them up. And there are verses in the Quran which are just there to wake us up, to make us realize that, oh, this is real, this is really happening. Allah is here and my life is not meaningless. That's the first type of verses that we'll encounter. Now, the second type is dealing with Nabuwah, this idea of prophethood, and they're essentially being a guide to help us to become heroes, right? So this is dealing with those people who understand that their life is purposeful, but they're still confused about where the different puzzles of life fit in. Where do all the pieces fit? Who's lying? Who's telling the truth? Who is who is the tyrant? Who is the good guys? All these kinds of things. Okay, so the second type of verses in the Quran deal with these types of things. Then there's a third, and this is Qiyamah. This is helping us to recognize that our smallest actions have the biggest of consequences. Now, we're going to go through the Quran, inshallah, and give examples for each of these. So first, let's go to the first group. Those people, or those elements within us, which think that life is a game. What does the Quran do? This is where the Quran will give us certain verses, like, for example, it will say, وَمَا هُوَ بِالْهَزْلِ. It is not a joke, the Quran says. Literally, guys, it says this book is not a joke. It's not here for amusement. It's not here just so that you can listen to it and it sounds nice. Although you do get rewarded for that, but that's not the real purpose. It's not here for your amusement. Okay? The Quran also says things like, it will say, أَفَحَسِبْتُمْ أَنَّمَا خَلَقَنَاكُمْ عَبَثًا. Do you suppose that we created you for no purpose? Just for no reason at all? In jest? وَأَنَّكُمْ إِلَيْنَا لَا تُرْجَعُونَ. And that you will not be returned to us? Is that really what you think? So these types of verses will shock you. And you have to allow them to shock you, because it's Allah's words. And He's trying to wake you up and make you realize. Remember, all of these things actually go back to Tawheed. Everything goes back to Tawheed. And if somebody truly is hit by these words of Allah, and he recognizes that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala really is watching everything that we do. In fact, forget watching. The Quran testifies, وَنَحْنُ أَقْرَبُ إِلَيْهِ مِنْ حَبْلٍ وَرِيدٍ. We are closer to Him. We're closer to human beings than His life vein. Allah is closer to you than the very veins in your body. Think about that for a moment. That means that even if you were separated from your blood and your bones and everything physical, you would still exist, and Allah would still be closer to you than any of that. If this realization hits a person, it will create a fire beneath them, and it will push them to try to be better and to try to find the realities and make the most of this life. Now, let's go to Surah Tawheed, because we are discussing about Tawheed. Remember, the first group of people thinks that life is all about, just إِنَّمَا الْحَيَاةُ الدُّنْيَا لَعِبٌ وَلَهُ. Surely the life of this world is nothing but a sport and play. And they're stuck, they're trapped in this world. They're not realizing that we have been created by Allah for a purpose, and our mission is to find that purpose. Look at Surah Tawheed, and I want to present this example so that we can understand how to visualize. Because remember, in the previous sessions, we talked about visualizing the Quran. Well, here's a perfect example of that. Go to Surah Tawheed. What does it say? Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Qul huwa Allahu ahad. Say, Allah is one. Notice how it says the word ahad, which means He doesn't use the word wahid. Wahid means one in Arabic, in the numerical sense. But here Allah is saying the word wahid, which a closer translation to that in English would actually be something like unified. Because we're talking about Allah, who is closer to you. He's also close to you. He's close to me. He's close to everybody else watching and everybody else in the world. And yet, he is what? He's one. A little bit of contemplation on these things would really shake a human being, make them realize the reality of these things. Allahus Samad, everything in existence depends on him. But then Surah Tawheed does something really strange, and it says, Lam yalid wa lam yulad. He is neither begotten, nor does he beget. He doesn't beget, nor is he begotten. He doesn't give birth to anything, nor is he given birth to. Okay, he doesn't create in the way that human beings create. This is the part that I'd like us to contemplate on and visualize, because if we visualize the Quran, then the realities will start to make sense to us. So imagine for a moment a pregnant woman. When the pregnant woman is a single entity, she's a pregnant woman. When she gives birth, her and the baby become two separate entities. They become separated. This is the point. In Lam Yalid wa Lam Yulad, Allah is explaining to us that when He creates us, He doesn't separate Himself from us. The creation that Allah does is not like begetting. It's not like giving birth to something. No. It's a creation in which He still remains نَحْنُ أَقْرَبُ إِلَيْهِ مِنْ حَبْلٍ وَرِيدٍ, closer to you than your jugular vein. So this is a bit of what I meant by visualizing the Quran. And these types of verses in the Quran are there to wake us up, to make us recognize that, well, this is not a joke. This is really happening. Okay, now let's move on to the second type, the second group. And if you're part of this group, this is going to be the bulk of our discussion, because therein lie the most of the problems. Life is a puzzle. Many of us will be confused. Life is a puzzle. It is a riddle. And the Quran is actually that thing which will help us to figure it out so that we can become the heroes of tomorrow. Okay. So the first thing is, life is a puzzle. The Quran, the first thing that it does is it presents for us. And remember, at the beginning of this discussion, I said, suspend, just forget about everything you thought before, just temporarily for the sake of this discussion. Just ignore it. Pretend you don't know anything. Clear your mind. Forget what you know about prophethood and imama, what the difference between a rasul and a nabi. Forget all of these things. Don't worry about that. Let's just talk about the bare bones minimum, the philosophical idea that Allah has presented for us role models to help us to grow as individuals. And look, it starts from the home. The first time you see your mother nurturing you or your father teaching you to do something, that is your original Nabi, your guide. Allah has sent that to guide you. As you grow, maybe your teacher in school will become your Nabi. And then you will reach to a point where the Prophet himself becomes your Nabi, and you really take him as your role model. It says, لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. There is in the Holy Messenger, surely there is in the Messenger, a perfect pattern, a perfect example, a pattern for you to follow. It's our duty as Muslims to try the best that we can to follow in the footsteps of the Prophet. Okay, but there's more to it. When the Quran is trying to help you figure out the riddle of life, he doesn't leave it just there. He says, محمد رسول الله والذين معه أشداء على الكفار رحماء بينهم. Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. He's the one who's come with the message of Allah. And those with him, notice how it doesn't say Muslims, it doesn't say Shi'as, it doesn't say Sunnis. Those who are with the messenger, they are firm of heart against the disbelievers and compassionate amongst themselves. The reason it's important to highlight this is because, look, there are many people who take one or the other extreme, where they think, some people will say, you know, Islam is all about peace and love, and, you know, we have to just love and embrace and love everybody. No, that's one extreme, where you are actually embracing those who are enemies of Islam, enemies of freedom, enemies of injustice. The Quran doesn't tell us to do that. And then there's another extreme, which just says everybody's a kafir except for me. Both of these extremes are wrong. Surprise, surprise. And the Quran is actually showing us that, look, this is the balance. Be with the messenger. Now, the Quran also helps us to understand in detail, and it helps us to remember, it's not about specifics. It is about the criterion. It gives you the criteria to differentiate. And it helps us to understand what's what, who's who. So, for example, it will give us examples like the two sons of Adam. Cain and Abel, one killed the other, okay? To show us that it doesn't matter who your father is, who your sons are, right? It gives us the example of the wife of Lut, who was a disbeliever, right? And it shows us that even being the wife or the spouse of a holy individual will not save you. No, it won't save you at all. The son of Nuh, it doesn't matter who your father is. It doesn't matter who your sons are. You might be from a really religious family. And the reason Allah is showing you all of these things is because He wants you to recognize that everything comes down to choice. That's all it is about. You can choose to be good, or you can choose not to be. You can choose to be a believer, or you can choose not to be. And it's showing you these things, that even if you are a believer, you should not be shocked if your own brother or your own spouse or your own father or your own mother or your own children are disbelievers. If you don't recognize these realities in the Quran, then I'll tell you something, guys. Allah will manifest these things for you in reality, and He will show you, here, look, this is what the reality is. So it's better if we actually just take the words of the Quran and believe in it before Allah shows it to us in reality. Because when it's shown to you in reality, it will shock you and it may hurt you. Allah is trying to prepare you for all these things which you may or may not experience in life. It's a reality. Okay. Now, what about the Christians and Jews and the other people that exist in the world? And many of us have this question in our hearts, especially growing up in the West, where we have so many different religious groups around us. The Quran is showing us, and it's given us answers for these kinds of things. Like, you will often find yourself asking, is my friend called Dave, who's a Christian, is he going to go to hell just because he's not a Muslim? You know, and often children will ask this. And by the way, guys, as I'm speaking, if any questions come into your mind, take the opportunity to write it down, and don't, so that you don't forget it. Remember, Islam has emphasized a great deal, and the Ahlul Bayt have emphasized on asking questions. So ask your questions and don't forget them. Ask them. Okay, so write them down, and inshallah, we'll get to them at the end. Now, the Christians and Jews, often people will ask this question, are they going to hell? Well, the Quran lays out for us, and it says, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَالَّذِينَ هَادُوا وَالنَّصَارَى وَالصَّابِئِينَ مَنْ آمَنَ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ فَلَهُمْ أَجْرُهُمْ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ. Anyone, it says, those who believe, surely those who believe, and the Jews and the Christians and the Sabians, anyone who believes in Allah, the Day of Judgment, and does good deeds, they will have their reward with their Lord. Okay, but don't get it wrong as well, because there's an extreme where you think, oh, you know, every religion and every person is going to heaven as long as they're a Christian or a Jew. No. Because the Quran also highlights for us, وَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا مِنْ أَهْلِ الْكِتَابِ وَالْمُشْرِكِينَ فِي نَارِ جَهَنَّمَ خَالِدِينَ فِيهَا. It also says, those who disbelieve among the Ahl Kitab, the Christians and the Jews, and those who are the mushrikeen, the polytheists, they will be in the depths of the fires of hell. أُولَٰئِكَ هُمْ شَرُّ الْبَرِيَّةِ. They are the worst of creation, right? So there are Christians and Jews and Sabians and others who will go to heaven because they truly do believe. And I'm sure that we've witnessed this, that there are good people on earth. They, for whatever reason, Allah hasn't guided them yet to Islam. But that doesn't mean that they're going to go to hell. And at the same time, there are others who are Christians and Jews and polytheists who are despicable people who exist in today's world, like the Zionists, like the evangelicals who are supporting them, and others too. We can see clear examples of them in the world that we live in today. And Allah says that they are the worst of creation. Okay, so this is Allah solving these puzzles for us. And what we have to also understand is the Quran is telling us about the mentality of people all around us. Because remember, we're talking about an instruction manual that is going to help you become a hero. How are you going to do that unless you understand the different groups that exist, what the different mentalities are? You need to understand who to work with, who not to work with, who to be cautious of, etc. And what the reactions of people will be when you try to speak to them about Islam and spread the good word about Islam and spread the truth. And one of these examples is these people who say, for example, the Quran says that when they are given the message of Islam, they say, حَسْبُنَا مَا وَجَدَنَا عَلَيْهِ آبَاءَنَا. Sufficient for us is what we found our forefathers upon. And this is a clear mentality that you will find amongst people, where people don't want to progress. You see, Islam is such a beautiful, progressive, innovative religion. We were supposed to be the innovators of the world. We were supposed to be the forerunners when it comes to technological advancements, when it comes to any sort of advancement. We were supposed to be the vanguards of ideological, economic development in the world. We were supposed to be leading it. Islam is the perfect pattern, the perfect ideology by which we should have been leading the world in all of this scientific and ideological thought. But what happened? We fell behind. Why? Because of this mentality. And the Quran is telling us that this mentality of people who say, oh, we will continue following what our forefathers followed, is the mentality of polytheists. Even if they say that they're Muslims, yes, even if they say they're Shia or Sunni, doesn't matter what people say. Because the reason the Quran is giving us the criteria for identifying certain mentalities is so that we can understand that even if this person says that he's Muslim, doesn't matter. His mentality is that of a Christian. His mentality is that of a Jew. His mentality is that of the polytheists. And of the mentality of the polytheists, this is one of those signs where they will say, you know, we've been doing this for years. Why should we change it? Islam is a religion which is living. It is alive in today's time. It is always relevant, fresh, new, dynamic, beautiful. But unfortunately, many people are presenting the religion as a stagnant religion and as a boring religion when it's not. It's anything but boring and monotonous and stagnant. Okay, another example of this is, and by the way, this is why Imam Ali alayhi salam says, don't inherit your religion. Learn it. Those who inherit their religion, just because my parents said this or some teacher said this or a scholar said this, what's the point? You're supposed to learn your religion. It's a duty. طلب العلم فريضة على كل مسلم ومسلمة. The acquisition of knowledge is a duty. It's a binding duty on all Muslims, whether you're a Muslim or a Muslimah, a brother or a sister. Okay, it is binding upon you to gain knowledge. And we have another hadith which says that knowledge is the lost property of the believer. He should strive to get it back. It's yours. Okay, so another mentality that we have is that the mentality that people have in regards to that role model, in regards to the prophets. Okay. And one of the things that they will say is, ما أنت إلا بشر مثلكم مثلنا. You're nothing but a human being like us. This is one of the things that they said to the prophets when they came to them. The polytheists looked at the prophets and they said, you're just like us. And there's another verse, it says, ما لهذا الرسول يأكل الطعام ويمشي في الأسواق. What's with this prophet? He eats food and he walks around in the markets. What's with him? Literally, the Quran is not just saying this to entertain us, right? It's showing us the mentality of those who reject Islam. What is their mentality? They believe that a prophet shouldn't eat, or he shouldn't be a normal person walking around in the markets buying food to feed his family. This is a mentality that exists. It's prevalent today, to the point where they believe that when they see the prophet, he'll be floating with like 2 angels on each hand, and his feet will never touch the ground. He won't have a shadow, and he will be like this absolutely angelic being. When Imam Mahdi comes, please, let's not reject him because we see him, I don't want to say it like this, but we're going to see him eating food and doing other human necessities. These were ordinary human beings like me and you, who came with a clear, logical message. And it was the message of Allah. From Adam, 124,000 prophets, 313 Rusul, and 5 Ulul Azm prophets. They all came with a very simple, clear message. And they were all human beings like me and you. To this day, we have people who are pushing this idea and actually teaching people that the Prophet never went to the bathroom, for example, that the holy women of light, say the Fatimah al-Zahra, for example, Salamun alayha, and others, that they didn't give birth naturally. This is all signs of Jahiliyyah, and this is one of the traits and the mentality of the mushrikeen as highlighted by the Quran. And by the way, guys, because of this mentality that exists, it's because of this mentality that when the Dajjal comes, many people may accept him. I mean, whether he's a system, whether he's a person, let's leave that discussion for another time. But the idea that a normal human being can trick people into thinking that he's God is because of this mentality. Because in the same way that they rejected these human beings who were logical human beings, they were just normal human beings, and they were speaking logic, the same way that they rejected them, they will accept people who speak no logic, but they perform fake miracles. And this is a phenomenon that we can see in places like India, and actually in places like America too, where you have all these fake preachers, these fake godmen, right? And all they do is they take out a golden orb or an egg from their mouth, and they say, ooh, and they give it to people, and then they take out pieces of gold, or they perform little tricks. People think that they're God, not because they're using their brains, but because they're fascinated and they think that this must be holy. We must be logical in order to be Muslims. Okay, now, another mentality which exists is that we obey those who present themselves as scholars other than Allah. And Allah highlights this for us in the Quran as well. And He says, اتخذوا أحبارهم ورهبانهم أربابا من دون الله. They took, it's talking about the Christians, they took their priests and their rabbis as lords other than Allah. A Christian had just converted to Islam, and he asked the Holy Prophet about this verse, and he said, Ya Rasulullah, I used to be Christian, and I never saw anybody bowing down to the prophets, to the scholars or the priests. Why does this verse say that we worshipped them? The Holy Prophet said to him, when you were a Christian, did the rabbis and priests ever tell you to do something contrary to the command of Allah? And he said, yes. Did you obey him? Did you obey those scholars? The man said, yes. He said, when you obeyed those scholars, You took them as arbaban min dunillah. You took them as lords other than Allah. When the Quran, this is a very central point that we have to understand. When the Quran is talking about worship, he's not talking about bowing down or doing sujood necessarily. He's talking about obedience. Okay, that which you obey is your Lord. Doesn't have to be, literally bowing down, literally doing sujood. No, that which you obey. There is a hadith from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, and he says that, look, if you give ear to anyone, if that person who you listen to is speaking the words of Allah, then you've obeyed Allah. And if that person is speaking the words of other than Allah and you listen to him, then you've worshipped other than Allah. There is another hadith from the Ahlul Bayt. They teach us that indeed, if a person gives something or someone their undivided attention, it is as though they have worshipped that thing. Now, if you're giving somebody or something your undivided attention and it is leading you to Allah, then that's a different thing. But if you're giving something your undivided attention and it's not leading you towards Allah, then that attention is also an act of worship. Allah, when we say in Surah Fatiha, for example, Iyyaka na'bud, ye alone do we worship, it actually means ye alone do we obey, ye alone do we conform to, you alone do we give our undivided attention to. Okay. So this is another mentality which exists today, where people obey their scholars other than Allah. And just very quickly, look, when it comes to the marja'as, because they are speaking the word of Allah, that is not disobeying Allah. You're actually obeying Allah by obeying those marja'as, because they are speaking directly from the Quran and the Hadith. They're speaking the commands of Allah. Their word is the word of Allah. Okay, just a quick point, just in case people got confused about that, okay? Another mentality which we have to recognize now is this. Most people are stupid. Really, most people are just dumb. And the sooner we recognize that, the better it will be for us. And this is why the Quran continuously and incessantly keeps saying, أَكْثَرَهُمْ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. Most of them don't know. أَكْثَرَهُمْ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ. Most of them don't believe. أَكْثَرَهُمْ لَا تَعْقِلُونَ. Most of them don't ponder. Most human beings are like this, and we have to recognize that. Look, when Trump is saying, it's suggesting that, injecting disinfectant might help to cure COVID-19, right? When we see things like, and guys, look, you have to understand, if a president can be that thick, then you have to understand that the people must be really dumb as well. And you have to also understand that they are stupid by design. And one of the reasons for that is because they need to be stupid. They need to be dumbed down in order to accept the taghut, which we'll come to in a moment. I looked it up. 7% of Americans actually believe that chocolate milk comes from brown cows. Now, this might be hilarious for people to hear. And look, I didn't believe it either. But after what Trump said about the disinfectant thing, I had to go look it up. And it changed my perspective. And I'm thankful to Allah for having sent Trump, because it's making me realize, really, people, they just don't know. They are really thick. And the Quran has been saying this, and I've been wondering, why is the Quran saying this? Because of this reason. Why are certain we have to be aware of this, because many of our brothers and sisters who are listening are part of that system. And it's the system itself which will make certain populaces dumbed down. Even educated people will be stupid to an extent. They just won't understand to an extent. I'm not saying this to insult. It's just a reality, okay? So one of the reasons why this happens is because the Taghut makes certain systems purposefully unintelligent. because it needs people to just go on consuming and behave like sheep and not realize that they have the power to become heroes. Okay, and this is why the Quran uses this word taghut, which means a system of kufr. It means a system which is oppressive. And what that system does is يُخْرِجُونَهُمْ مِنَ النُّورِ إِلَى الظُّلُمَاتِ. It takes them out of the light into the darkness. And this is why the Quran emphasizes وَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا أَوْلِيَاءُهُمُ الطَّاغُوتِ. Those who disbelieve, their wali, their guardian is the taghut. Okay, so these are all things that are helping us to figure out the puzzle of life. And I know it's been a little bit heavy, but I'm just going to quickly end with the third sphere. So we've talked about those people who, for whom life is nothing, those people for whom life is a puzzle, and now we're moving on to the third and final sphere, which is for those people who now have traversed those boundaries and they've understood that life is an opportunity. And here is where you will find all of those beautiful verses, which, unless you have made it through those first two phases, these verses won't make sense to you and they will seem irrelevant to you. It's this third phase which will take you from being an ordinary person to being a hero. And this is why Allah will say things like, Inna fatahna laka fathan mubina. Surely we have given you a manifest victory. If you're not a hero, if you don't have that heroic mentality, then this instruction manual, this verse won't make sense. Victory for what? A manifest victory against who? What battle am I fighting that I would need a victory? It just becomes irrelevant. This is where we'll find verses which say things like قَدْ أَفْلَحَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ. Surely the believers have been successful. Successful where? What do you mean successful? How are they successful? I don't see their success. This is why we'll see verses that say things like رُبَمَا يَوَدُّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا لَوْ كَانُوا مُسْلِمِينَ. Often will those who disbelieve wish that they had been Muslims. If you don't understand the first two phases, this won't make sense to you. Why would they wish to be Muslims? What do we have that they don't have? We have to be hungry in the month of Ramadan. Why would disbelievers want that? No. If you understand that the mission was always to establish justice on earth, and that when you establish a system which opposes the Taghut, that system will actually help all human beings to grow and benefit from this world and the hereafter, then it will make sense. Just like the establishment of the Islamic Revolution and Iran today, look at what Iran is doing. Whether you're Sunni or Shia, doesn't matter. Because that nation applied the Quran and the Ahlul Bayt, and they said, we are going to apply Islam totally to our political structure. Because they did that and they resisted against the Taghut, now Iran is becoming the fastest growing nation in science in the entire world. Today, the country is rising up, and you can see the decline of the Western world happening and the rise of the Muslim world happening. So these verses will start to make sense to us when we come to this phase. And of course, the verses which give us promises of, and it keeps on encouraging us, keep on going, don't worry, it's going to be okay. Allah will keep on comforting us. And this comfort will make sense for us when we embark on that journey of becoming a hero. And this is when Allah will say things like, وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ أُولَئِكَ هُمْ خَيْرُ الْبَرِيَّةِ. Those who believe and do good deeds, they are the best of creation. جزاؤهم عند ربهم جنات عدن تجري تحتها الأنهار خالدين فيها أبدا. Their reward with their Lord are gardens eternal gardens under which flow rivers, and they will live and abide in there for all eternity. Radiyallahu anhu wa radu an. They are pleased with Allah and He is pleased with them. This is for one who fears his Lord. Now, I'd like to, now, at this phase, when you recognize that life is an opportunity, you really realize that life it's like a seed. Every action that you are doing is a tiny seed. It might seem tiny, but that seed will grow into a great tree. The smallest of actions have the greatest of consequences. If they're good actions, they will lead you to the best of consequences. And if they're evil actions, they will lead you eventually to the most evil of consequences. And if we just understand that if we are good for a time and we are patient, then it will pay off later on and we can have ease in this life. Then we will understand the overall pattern and recognize that if we spend this moment of life properly, then eternity will be ahead of us. Now, just to round everything off, because I know it's been a lengthy discussion today, just to round everything off. So we've discussed how the Quran is not an ordinary book. It is an instruction manual for heroes. And this should answer why it becomes irrelevant for so many people. Unless you embark on that journey, unless you tell yourself that I am going to be the best that I can be, I am going to commit, I'm going to commit myself entirely to Islam. I am going to give up all sins. And yes, it is possible. If you embark on that journey, that's when Islam, the Quran, will start to truly speak to you and it will become relevant. Whether you believe that life is just a game, whether you think that life is a puzzle, whether you think that realize that life is an opportunity, the Quran has a message for you today, now, and until the end of your life. You think that life is a game, I'll remind you that He is there with you and it will wake you up. And if you think that life is a riddle, then Allah will help you to understand what's going on in your life. And He will give you the perfect role model. And He will make you understand the criterion so that you can recognize who the leaders and the role models of today are. And if you have understood that life is an opportunity and you take up the mission of becoming a hero, then Allah will reassure you of great things ahead of you. Inna fatahna laka fathan mubina. And with that, I'm sorry guys, way over my time. I hope you can forgive me. I get a little bit excited when I'm talking about the Quran. I pray that you all benefited for it. And I'd like you all, wherever you are, to give a loud and boisterous salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And we'll take one or two questions, inshallah. Oh, just a reminder before we go to the questions, if anybody out there would like to sponsor these sessions, then please do contact the organizers, send a message if you like, and we can organize a Surah Fatiha for your loved ones. Okay, now let's see these questions. I'll pause my screen. Oh, quite a few, okay. Let's see. Okay. Sister Maryam, one of the atheist's articles, and one thing made my mind busy. He had written, I read Quran and I became atheist. Why should your God that you claim is a Rahim and kind even burn the ones who don't believe Him? What your God does to those people is way more than what ISIS did to people. Wow. So why should I be burnt through though I don't believe in Him? Would you please answer this? Yeah, I mean, This is a very good question, and I think it's one of those questions which we often get bugged by. And it's quite simple. Look, basically, you're burning yourself. It's the wrong mentality that disbelief is something which is going to harm Allah in any way. No, disbelief is actually harming us. We fail to reach our maximum potential, and all we get is what we have planted in this world. We reap what we sow. And look, it doesn't come down, you can't just say that you believe. It doesn't matter. Look at the first verse, first and second verses of Surah Ankabut. What does it say? It says, look, you can't. Do you think that you'll just be left alone to say, I believe, and you won't be tested? That doesn't even make sense. You can't only say you believe, and you can't only do good deeds either. You can't go about life saying, I'm doing good deeds. No. You have to do both, believe and do good deeds. And Allah will, we have to understand this. This is a reality, and it is emphasized in the Quran that those who disbelieve will be punished in the hereafter. They will face torment and flames. And the thing is, they will be punished in this life as well. Let's go to this hadith quickly. The Imam, the infallible Imam, was asked, how can you be infallible? How can you avoid all sins? That doesn't even make sense. So the Imam says to him, well, look at this carcass on the floor, this dirty, disgusting, maggot-ridden, fly-infested, dead corpse on the ground. Would you eat it? And the guy said, no, I wouldn't eat it. So the Imam said, the way that this looks disgusting to you, evil deeds look like this to us. We have to understand that belief are things which harm us. So if an individual is going towards disbelief, that's what he's earning for himself in the hereafter. There's no other way around it. So we reap what we sow, and disbelievers are reaping hellfire because that's all they're doing with their lives. They're going thinking that, oh, it's just a joke and I'm just going to live here like an animal. If you live like an animal, on the day of judgment, you'll be raised as an animal. That's it. Sins lead to despair. They lead to pain. They lead to agony. That's the point. Assalamu alaikum. Doesn't the verse of purity indicate that all purity... Wait. Doesn't that mean their bodies are always ritually pure no matter if it... That's a very good question, and that'll take a long time to answer. So I'm going to scroll up and see if I can see any other questions. Okay. Yes, because so Niall asks, is there, brother Niall, is there a reason why Allah hasn't put any details on how to pray salah in the Quran, but has put many details on how to do wudu? A very good question. Remember, the Quran always gives us as much as we need. And it says, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Ask the people of remembrance if you don't know. And I know that this verse is actually referring to the Christians and Jews, but if we just look at the concept of it for a moment, look, ask those who don't know if you don't know. And we have to turn to the Ahlul Bayt for the actual, the interpretation of the Quran. And for that, we go to the tafsir. But the reason I haven't, and a lot of people might be thinking why I haven't mentioned much about the Ahlul Bayt. And the reason for that is because, look, it is the Ahlul Bayt. The Quran is the Ahlul Bayt, and the Ahlul Bayt are the Quran. We've made the mistake of separating them from each other. But if we go back to Hadith al-Thaqalain, the Prophet is saying that they will never separate from each other until they meet me at the pool of Kawthar. They are one and the same. But we see this imbalance, and I am going to answer your question, by the way. I'm not avoiding it, but I just want to give you this preliminary thought. There is this imbalance which has struck the Ummah, unfortunately, where you have one group saying that they take the Quran, but they've actually abandoned the Ahlul Bayt, and another group which has taken the Ahlul Bayt, but they've abandoned the Quran. in reality, they've both abandoned both the Quran and the Ahlul Bayt. They have neither, because they are one and the same. Now, when it comes to the interpretation of the Quran, you have to go to the Ahlul Bayt, to the Holy Prophet, to the ahadith of the Ahlul Bayt, okay? And I think that, remember we said that at the beginning of this discussion that Allah is giving us the criterion. So when it comes to the details of salah, Allah says, pray, and He does give some details about the timings of the prayers, for example. But when it comes to the wudu, He's more specific. I don't know exactly why He's more specific, but I can say why He doesn't give that many details in the Quran. It's because the Quran isn't there for that. The Ahlul Bayt are there for that. The Quran is there to tell you to pray. The Ahlul Bayt is there to tell you how. Okay? And there's a verse in the Quran, and by the way, I'm so sorry, guys. I should have left more time for questions, but it looks like I'm going to have to end with this because I've outdone my time. But we'll end with this. The Quran says, هُوَ الَّذِي أَنزَلَ عَلَيْكَ الْكِتَابِ. It is He who has sent down the book, who has revealed the book. مِنْهُ آيَاتٌ مُحْكَمَاتٌ هُنَّ أُمُّ الْكِتَابِ وَأُخْرَ مُتَشَابِهَاتٌ. Within this book are firm, decisive verses. They are the foundation of the book. And other verses are allegorical, they're metaphorical. فَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ زَيْغٌ فَيَتَّبِعُونَ مَا تَشَابَهَ مِنْهُ ابْتِغَاءَ الْفِتْنَةِ وَابْتِغَاءَ تَأْوِيلِهِ. So as for the one in whose heart there is deviation, just think about this for a moment. The person in whose heart there is deviation, he will take those parts which are allegorical and he will seek to create fitna, and he will seek to give it his own interpretation. When you approach the Quran, dear brothers and sisters, respected elders, be careful that your heart doesn't contain deviation. And even if we have purified ourselves to a certain extent, we have to understand that when we are living, especially in the West, when we're living under a Taghuti system, there are ideologies within our hearts which may have misled us and created deviation in our hearts. For example, feminism, capitalism, ideas of socialism, democracy, liberalism, all of these isms they are other than Allah, and they have affected our hearts. If we try to apply what we think is right to the Quran, then all we're doing is doing what those people do when they have deviation in their hearts. And we're trying to create fitna, and we're trying to actually give it our own interpretation. وَمَا يَعْلَمُ تَأْوِيلَهُ إِلَّا اللَّهُ. Only Allah knows its interpretation. And those, the prophets and the Ahlul Bayt. So we have to turn to Allah. How do we turn to Allah? Through the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt. There is no other way. And we can discuss about this another time. But just to finish this verse, because it actually inculcates this entire discussion. It says, وَالرَّاسِخُونَ فِي الْعِلْمِ يَقُولُونَ آمَنَّا بِهِ. And those who are foremost in knowledge, they say, we believe in it. We believe in the Quran. كُلٌّ مِّنْ عِنْدَ رَبِّنَا. They say all of it is from our Lord. So they completely embrace the entirety of the book. All of it is relevant. And we have to get to this point where we accept all of Islam, not just bits and pieces of it, not those verses that appeal to us. Like a common trend that we see in the Ummah is where people say, La ikraha fid din. There is no compulsion in religion, because it's a trendy thing to say and it sounds nice. You can't force people into religion. Nobody said that anybody should be forced. You can't force anybody. La ikraha fid din. You can't force anybody to religion. It doesn't make sense. But at the same time, the very next verse, what does it say? قَدْ تَبَيَّنَ الرُّشْدُ مِنَ الْغَيِّ. The right way has become very distinct and clear from error. So don't approach the Quran with preconceived ideas. Open your heart to Allah. Allow Him to speak to you and see what He says. I've gone way over my time, and I'm really sorry, guys. I'd love to take more questions, but it's getting close to my iftar suhoor time, and I'm gonna have to end it here. And I'd like you all to recite the Surah Fatiha, inshallah, for all the marhumin. And with that, I bid you Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.